I had a great teaching from a Peruvian traditional teacher who did a very, very long ceremony. And at the end of it, he said, if you remember only one thing from our time together, remember this: consciousness creates matter. Language creates reality. Ritual creates relationship. And those 9 words landed in me in such a big way. And when you refer to witches, a witch is simply a way of describing someone who believes in the invisible world, a person who believes that energy has purpose, and that intention can be directed in ways that can help, I like to say, will manifest change in our lives. And so the one phrase of those 3 that really landed in me most was ritual creates relationship.
Welcome back, my friends, to the Awaken Heart podcast. And today's conversation is with Nina Simons. And it's a beautiful conversation. It is one that is so important right now in our world. And that's women. That's women cultivating an authentic way to lead from their femininity. And it's needed in our world right now so much. A lot of women they're operating much more from a masculine, which we all have masculine and feminine within ourselves, but it's operating more from like an intuitive place, from your heart, emotions, clearing away the layers of old conditioning that's keeping us from living with our own authentic expression. During this conversation, we dive into so many different topics of what it means to be a woman and a leader in today's world. And, it's about getting out of the head into the heart and having deep listening-ship, and what it means to reclaim leadership from our femininity. Hi, Nina. Welcome to the Awaken Heart podcast.
Thank you, Nancy. Good to be here with you.
I'm so glad you're here. And I'm really excited about this conversation with you. And as you can see, I was going to raise up the book so everyone can see this book here. It's probably going to be backwards, but you can see it right there. This lovely lady wrote this beautiful book, Nature, Culture, and the Sacred. A woman listens for leadership. And it's so important in this world right now for women to find their voice and become leaders in the world. There's the whole thing about a lot of women have been operating out of the masculine, which isn't a bad thing to have some masculine, but when it's not in authenticity to them tapping into their full femininity, it's, a lot of women are feeling kind of exhausted or burnt out, or finding that they're not, I don't know, they're not finding their flow, or they're not finding their way. And you I'm like messing up here. You're the co-founder of Bioneers, and you had a deep inquiry when you were awarded back in the 90s. It's been around over 30 years. And you had an inquiry as to what leadership means, because you had you were awarded, and you just weren't as excited as you thought you should be getting this award, and this led to your inquiry as to what it means to be in leadership as a woman. Can you give a little bit of your background, more than what I gave in the introduction, and how it led you to this inquiry?
Sure. Bioneers is an organization that I have the honor of co-shepherding for all these years. And what we do is we lift up leaders from all walks of life who have demonstrated practical and visionary solutions for many of our most challenging environmental and social problems. And So basically, I got acknowledged for my leadership in a magazine, and I didn't like it. I really found that I wanted to deflect it. I didn't like being identified that way. And I thought, if what I've learned from Bioneers is that the earth needs us all to be leaders in this time, and I don't want to be called a leader, what's wrong with that picture? And
Mm.
so I began this inquiry about how we're all products of a culture that has been heavily biased toward the masculine and the intellect, and away from leading from the heart and the awakened heart, as you so wisely have focused on, Nancy. And I realized that we are all living through this legacy of imbalance, and that imbalance has permeated our inner worlds as well as our outer world. So it's both on an individual level that we've internalized this notion that all human qualities associated with the masculine are good and important and valuable, and the human qualities associated with the feminine, we tend to not value as much in ourselves. And as a result, we perpetuate that imbalance that we've inherited. And I found that to be true in leadership. And what I did, Nancy, was the first thing I did was, because I have this extraordinary learning opportunity with Bioneers, I read dozens and dozens of manuscripts from talks from leaders from all walks of life. And what I found was that the ones that I admired most were the ones who were leading from the heart. And my first book is actually a collection of 30 essays, and all but 2 of them are women. And it's called Moonrise, The Power of Women Leading from the Heart. And so I read all of their stories, and then I looked for themes about how they were modeling new forms of leadership. And what I found was that they were all leading from what they love and care about most. And they were leading in ways that were collaborative and sharing power. And they were leading in ways that prioritized relationship over task. And so they had a whole different style of leadership. And I began to understand that the reason I had had that aversion when I was first called a leader was because of my mental model. Because I thought, oh, leaders are like the charismatic guys at the front of the room who are top down, and often they've achieved leadership through some external conferring of leadership, rather than because they love something so much and feel so passionate about supporting or reinventing or defending it. And so I found that there were new models of leadership that I could wholeheartedly aspire to. And as I worked with women leaders who were diverse in every way over the course of about 20 years, doing a deep dive into women's leadership. And what I found was that even though we had invited them based on their leadership accomplishments and their leadership devotion, they all arrived saying that they didn't consider themselves leaders. And by the end of a week of work together, they could leave accepting that name in a different way. So that kind of gives you a taste of my journey. I mean, as the book describes, I've really been very devoted to many different octaves of the feminine, and reclaiming that balance that I think we as a species, there are Mayan prophecies that say this is the time of the woman. This is the time for women to lead and for the feminine to lead. And really what I'm seeing as I scan all kinds of movements in the social world and the environmental world is that women-led movements are making the greatest progress. And they're having benefits to all aspects of their communities. And so a lot of the work we have to do, I think, as women, is about shedding those layers of conditioning that cause us to think small and limit ourselves and doubt whether we're capable, and cultivate the belief in our love and our hearts and this world, to trust that when we bring ourselves to something wholeheartedly, we can and will make a difference and we'll have the most joyful lives we could imagine.
Mm, I love that. And so you had a cultivating women's leadership intensive. That's what you're speaking about, how those
Yeah.
women had come and they didn't feel very good about their leadership. And they did this week intensive and they really found their deep, authentic voice by the end of this intensive. It's pretty incredible. What are some of the experiences? I know you share some in your book of some, maybe one story or another, a story about some of the women that went through your intensive, as far as where
Mm.
they were when they first came in to where they how they blossomed, by the time it was over and what they went to build afterwards.
Well, over 500 women came through that program over the course of about 15 years.
Wow.
And it was such an honor to serve them. And they have blossomed in all kinds of ways. One of the ones that just comes immediately to mind is actually a colleague of mine at Bioneers. And she's an Indigenous art
Mm,
photographer named Cara Romero. And when Kara first came, she was relatively new to working with us at Bioneers. And we did something called a vision stand, where we actually explored how will the world be different as a result of your leadership.
mhm.
And what she actually described, and she's very humble and very conscious of observing protocols and not stepping outside her boundaries, and but she's also very expressive and highly creative. And when she did her vision stand, she said, I am going to become an internationally renowned Indigenous art photographer, and through that form I am going to be able to elevate the dignity and help people see the diversity and the beauty of Indigenous cultures. And since then, she has actually achieved that. And she
Mm,
currently has photographs hanging in the Metropolitan Museum of Art
wow.
and in the Museum of Modern Art. And, I was talking to her about that recently, and she said, that was the first time that I had ever said that out loud.
Mm,
I had never dared to say it out loud to anybody before then. And so part of what we did, Nancy, really was to create a circle of trust and to share in very intimate ways our own learning through the week. And some of that included screening the burning times, which
yes,
you
please
had
speak into
mentioned you might
that.
want to talk about.
Mhm.
But part of why I wrote this book was to be able to integrate a lot of my learning from those retreats into kind of a manual to offer women of any age, of any background, a kind of a guidebook for ways to reflect and circle up with some women friends and accelerate your own learning and growth, because there's so much joy in shedding the shedding the cage, I
Mhm.
think, or the bonds that I used to feel about what I could and couldn't do, and feeling so much freer at this point in my life to really integrate all of me into an offering to the world.
It's beautiful. And you were talking about the sacred sisterhood, like having women together and collaborating together. There's such sacredness in that when you're, really there for each other and you're really lifting and illuminating each other. And I find that so
Yes.
powerful because this is something that was done in cultures, way back when we used to menstruate together and we used to have our children around the same time. We raised our children and we had, all these these circles with women that were sages, that were wise women, that were herbalists. And you were talking about the burning times. And I had listened to one of your conversations when you went into it. And, I had known about all those horrible dark years where women were just persecuted, but you said it so eloquently. Like there was actually an aha moment in that about like how it was a 300-year persecution and 6 generations were affected. And there's a root story there for women because so many of us were persecuted down our lineage, down our, through our, you know, outside of our own conscious awareness. Our subconscious remembers those times, and it's actually affecting how we are, stepping into and using our voice and finding our truth because we still have those imprints from all those horrible dark times that women have gone through. Can you speak into the burning times? I'm just so fascinated by that and just how how we're starting to finally overcome those times.
Yeah. Well, let me just say that for everyone listening, you can go online and Google the burning times, and you'll be able to see it's an hour-long film that was made in the early 90s by a Canadian woman filmmaker. And when I came across it, it rocked my world because suddenly all of the problems that I had learned about through Bioneers made sense through the lens of gender. And I was shocked because I thought, why haven't I learned about this in school? This is a huge event in human history. And as you mentioned, Nancy, for roughly 200 to 300 years across most of the nations of Europe, women were systematically tortured and persecuted and often killed for the supposed crime of being witches. And when I first learned about it, I thought, first of all, can this be true? And I started researching. And what I found was, as I mentioned earlier, that this is not only about the women and their direct families and their villages who were tortured and burned, but also during the burning times, there was a huge transfer of wealth from prior to the burning times. The women of Europe owned more wealth than the men. And at the end of the burning times, the wealth had been transferred to the men because every time someone turned in a woman, they were rewarded with money. And so, in many ways, that might have been the beginning of the catfight syndrome, of women turning against
Mm,
each other in order to save themselves. And when I realized, and the medicine at the beginning of the burning times, the women were the midwives and the herbalists and the doulas. And by the end of the burning times, only men could practice medicine. Um, and they had to go to medical school, and only men were allowed in medical school. So all of these different systems of society got transferred from the purview of women to the purview of men. And of course, spirituality wise, there was a tremendous shift because Christianity, this was the rise of Christianity. And a lot of it involved a sort of hiding of the pagan traditions and the traditions that connected spirituality to the earth and to women's direct experience. And instead, spirituality became a mediated experience, which only priests were able to create. So it was a revelatory learning for me. And excuse me one sec.
no worries.
Thank you.
Hmm.
And when I saw it, Nancy, what I realized was that it was the first time that things that I had always been fearful about made sense to me. I had always been fearful about speaking in public about what I cared most about. And when I saw the burning times, I was like, oh,
Mm.
maybe this started there. And science is, of course, proving now that through epigenetics, that trauma is passed on through lineages. And that therefore, what I have come to believe is that while the burning times was especially prevalent in Europe, there were smaller versions of it in the US, and there were different versions of it all over the world. And so, what I have come to believe is that everyone alive on earth today carries an imprint of the demonizing of that which is associated with women and the feminine, and the elevating of the masculine and men. And that all of the worst challenges that we face today, from climate change to economy to, you know, toxicity, all of it can be seen as a function of the imbalance of the masculine and feminine. So that's what really got me on my journey about gender and womanhood, and led me directly to value my heart, to learning how to value my heart's guidance
Mm.
much more than my head's.
Yes, we're taught so much to disregard our intuition. Intuition is what guided us for so many years before these dark times. And even before that, there's like societies where women were their goddesses, and they were revered and they held high positions in society like over 2000 years ago. And systematically over time, with with religion and the churches, even the right hand of, it just depends on what you believe, but some women, even within Jesus's times, were like his right hand man, but that gets erased out of history. And just like you were saying about how we didn't learn about this in school, how there's so many selective learnings that really serves the patriarchy as well, because we can't have those things, these witches. Even I bristle now at the time when someone says witches. I'm like, yeah, I am a witch. My sisters. And my sisters are witches. So it's like so derogatory. And then you were talking about like in your intensives, there's the ancestors and indigenous cultures and how we can learn from them, and how important it is for women to get out in nature. And because nature is such a feminine, it's such a balancing for us. So what are some other ways that women can, if they're feeling out of balance, to really, and they want to speak up and lead from a place of authenticity and truth and the feminine? How would you what are some examples you would give them to start doing today, to start doing these inquiries?
Well, a lot of this begins with self-awareness in
Mm.
my experience, Nancy. And, one of the things, here's an example. Um, I had a great teaching from a Peruvian traditional teacher who did a very, very long ceremony. And at the end of it, he said, if you remember only one thing from our time together, remember this: consciousness creates matter,
Hmm.
language creates reality, ritual creates relationship. And those 9 words landed in me in such a big way. And when you refer to witches, a witch is simply a way of describing someone who believes in the invisible world, a person who believes that um, energy has purpose, and that intention can be directed in ways that can help. I like to say, will manifest
Mhm.
change in our lives. And so the one phrase of those 3 that really landed in me most was ritual creates relationship. And one of the earliest things that I remember noticing was I would come out of the shower in the morning and look at my body in the mirror. And I'm guessing other people may relate to this.
Mm.
I would look at my body and go, oh, your hips are too big, or your butt's too this, or your belly's too round, or all these voices of self-criticism would go off in my head. And I realized that I was doing myself harm every day. And so I decided to create a ritual to help heal that in myself. And what I did was very simple. I got a skin oil that I liked the texture of and the scent of, and I added some essential oils to it that made me happy to smell, and shook it up. And each morning when I got out of the shower, I would oil my body with that scented oil. And as I did so, I would consciously just take that tiny little 3 to 5 minutes to pour love into my body and to thank it for all the ways it gives me this vessel to bring to life. And what I found was that after 6 or 8 weeks, something changed in me. And so there are a whole bunch of rituals that I describe in the book for appreciating ourselves. We all have those self-judging, self-limiting voices. And really, they don't do us any good. They only harm us. Mm-hmm. And they only serve to keep us small. And so I think we have a healing work that begins on the inside. And that the more we can appreciate our particular gifts and stop beating ourselves up for what we're not, and stop comparing ourselves to other people. One of the things that I found about the sacred sisterhood and getting together in circle with women you love and trust is that it's very hard for us to see ourselves, right? I mean, I always thought that if I was a certain way, then everyone must be. But that's not true. The truth is, we're all as different and varied as, snowflakes, or as there are leaves on a tree. They're all different, and so that connection to nature, I feel like it's one of the ways we can cultivate our relationship to the invisible world, is by recognizing that we're a part of nature, not apart from it. Mm-hmm. And I can offer one other short story. Do you think there's time?
Oh, yes, there's time. Please do.
Oh, okay. I live in northern New Mexico, and there was a time earlier this year when there was a huge wildfire, and it was actually threatening the area of our home. And I reached out to a friend who I knew had studied a great deal and who had used a ritual to help protect her land when it was threatened with wildfire. And I asked her help, and she taught me how to do a ritual for protecting our land. And what she taught me was to identify a tree somewhere near our home. And if you live in a city, you can probably do it with a plant. And to actually create an altar around the base of the plant or the tree, and to put flowers in that altar, and to water it daily, and every few days or maybe once a week, to sometimes offer it a little bit of wine. And as you do that, you make a prayer to it.
Wine, you said? You did say wine, right?
I did say wine.
I love it.
I did.
Okay. All right.
I did.
Right. Cheers.
And because that's how they know we're serious, yep. Right? Mm-hmm. And in my case, because I live in the country, I could pray to the tree to carry my gratitude and my prayers for forgiveness down into the earth through her roots, and up to the sky people and the stars through her branches, and to the mountain nearby, and to tell it how thankful I am for the ways that this land has supported my life and my flourishing. And that simple prayer, which I've done now every day since it's been, 6 or 8 months, since that happened is helping me understand how the land supports us and how Native peoples understand that everything we are and everything we experience, we owe gratitude to the earth, our mother, for.
Mhm.
That she is actually, we are not apart from nature, we are a part of nature. And everything we can do to help remember that, and find a species ally to be your mentor and observe it closely for a year and see what you learn. Because really, we are one of the youngest species we are living among.
Mhm.
And we're not all that smart, we just think we are. And nature knows how to create conditions for life to thrive without mortgaging our future, you know? And without sacrificing our future. So we have a lot to learn. So I hope that
Mm.
answers your question.
Yes.
There's
There's
lots more in the book.
there's yes, I know. I love your book and how it's just divided up with, prompts for you to consider and internalize and journal about and work on. And I love all your poetry. You wrote all this yourself, right? All these beautiful
I
and the
did.
yes, and the one on your mother, I know you lost her several years ago and there's a dedication in there. It's beautiful. And
Mm, thank you.
yeah, I know that was a hard time and you honored her passing, her transition.
Well, and so many of us are going through challenging times now and losing loved ones,
Mhm.
and I think in a way it's part of the legacy of a patriarchal culture that we are so illiterate about loss and death and hardship. And part of what I'm finding, and this relates to that great talk that you gave, Nancy, that I
Mm,
listened to
thank you.
about how we face into change. I've been thinking a lot recently about how most of the women leaders that I most admire have been through really tough hardship in one way or another, traumatic experiences, um, in this lifetime or sometimes intergenerationally. And I think a friend just introduced me to a great phrase, which was, she said that in the restorative justice world, there's a phrase called trauma wise. And if we're lucky, we go through those difficult challenges and we become wiser for them. And we become somehow stronger, like our core gets strengthened by them. And so it's a helpful thing to remember when you're going through loss and hardship is you can hope to turn towards it in a way that reclaims the feminine, that reclaims our heartfulness and our ability to grieve. I think one of the greatest things that could happen in the whole world is for men to have a grieving day all over the world. Can you imagine
Mm,
if men all over the world were
tapping
actually
into
given
their
permission to take a day off and feel the grief of what's going on?
mhm.
Oh, it could change everything.
Mm. And that's like what you
Yeah.
had said too, that masculine is exteriority and the feminine is interiority. So we are able to feel, and we've been just, you know, not teased, but about us being so emotional in the workplace, or, it's been such a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing at all. It's the most powerful thing that we can do is feel into our emotions. And, we're devaluing that in women. We've learned to value like the masculine way of doing things instead of valuing what is true and natural for us as women. And a lot of that is the emotions. And
Yes.
it,
And I
it's,
think I,
Mhm.
I think emotions are one of the ways that nature speaks through us. I think that if we can learn to become more sensitized to our emotions and value them more and let ourselves feel them when they
Mhm.
arise, I have a wonderful mentor named Carla McLaren, and she says that anger is your body's way of telling you that a boundary has been trespassed. Well, boy, do we have a lot of good reason to be angry. And, you know, the the attempt to control the feminine and to dominate the feminine is very present in our world today,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as is the attempt to control history and what's taught and the truth. So, you know, we are living through echoes of that time in many ways. And yet, most of us are fortunate enough to live in countries where we are not directly persecuted for it
Mm-hmm.
and have an opportunity to grow into our fullest expression because the earth and our society needs it from us now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so liberating.
It is. And I feel so fortunate to live in this country. Really, we have so many opportunities that really, women really can do just about anything, especially here in this country. And thank God we're not still in the Mad Men era. I had to turn. I started watching that back in the day and had to send it back because I was just so horribly upset at the way that women were treated back then. But really, we have so many opportunities here compared to so many other countries where women really are in dark days and still persecuted, seeing what's happening in Iran still, and so many other cultures that the women are just, and there's rising up happening, and the media
Yes.
is not talking about it as much as it needs to be talked about, and we're still having relations with these countries that are really oppressing their peoples, and my heart aches for it and for all humanity. It's every we're all one, despite our color,
Well,
despite our
and
preferences and our religions. And
yeah. And part of what we have to do is call that out.
mhm,
You know, I mean, I have a friend who has a beautiful campaign going to have Iran kicked out of the UN Commission on the
please,
Status of Women,
thank you.
you know, because how crazy for a country that is, you know, persecuting its women in the ways that it does to be a part of the UN Commission on the
Mhm.
Status of Women. That's just wrong, you know? So we've
Change
got to
makers.
call out the hypocrisy.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I haven't really seen much. I mean, I don't watch mainstream news at all, thank God. But I see clips and stuff coming through, and I see things in the communities that I follow, and there was a lot, and now we're on to the other thing. And there's supposed to be like these horrific, I mean, they were just tried, like 15,000 of them might be put to death, which is horrific beyond uh, all my understanding. So my thoughts and prayers go out to all those beautiful women and all those beautiful humans in all these other countries that don't have the opportunities that we do here. So
Well, and appreciation for their incredible courage to be
absolutely.
protesting in the face of that kind of tyranny
Mhm.
is wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was beautiful too that I was seeing that men were actually standing up for the women. Women were like, we're so upset how our sisters are being treated. And I've seen ones where they're actually like, one of the religious police went and slapped a woman on the street for no reason, and the guy did not get away. Like he got, men went after him. I mean, I don't perpetuate violence with violence. It wasn't really violence, but they were not having that. So I was really happy to
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
look forward to the day when men stand more with us in this country,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, and can understand that power is not a zero-sum game,
Mhm.
and that as more women rise up into leadership in all its forms, including parenting, motherhood, art making, teaching, you know, there are so many forms of leadership, and you can lead from behind, you can lead from anywhere in the room and in any style that is appropriate for you. But as more and more women gain their own full autonomy and authority, it's better for everyone. All
Mhm.
the men benefit, the economy benefits, the food system benefits, the climate benefits. It's just crazy. Everything benefits.
Mhm. And what is that
Yeah.
expression, behind every great man is a great woman, or that side
Well,
by
or behind
side?
every great man is a woman rolling her eyes.
Yeah, exactly. I like that one. I like that one. Yes. So So leadership, it's peeling away the layers. Like that's the first place to start is internally with yourself. You just peel away all those beautiful layers that are just, I mean, we're already there. It's becoming aligned with who we really are at an essence, but peeling away all that old conditioning, honoring the emotions, tackling our shadows like you did with the lotion. I love that. The essential oil and the lotion, it's loving yourself and looking in the mirror like,
Mhm.
I love you. You're
Yeah.
beautiful because what is it? It's our own perception. It's our own whatever's happening in society saying that we should be, that's coming through our head because we are beautiful. We are divine. And, having compassion with ourselves and integrating the shadow and the light and being, honoring there's not one right and there's not one wrong. It's integrating the whole and really, really honoring and loving all aspects of ourselves.
Well, I think that's true. And I think another aspect of cultivating our leadership has to do with um, clarifying both what we're most passionate about. There are exercises in the book where I suggest you ask yourself, what do I most love? You know, what is it that breaks my heart? What are
Mhm.
the stories that when I hear them or read about them, they break my heart? Or, you know, what am I most passionate about reinventing? Like we all know that education is kind of funky in this country right now. Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe it's time to reinvent some aspect of education, but identifying that which calls you and speaks to your heart. And one of the things I try to notice, Nancy, is, what are the ideas or the issue areas that when I learn about them, they won't let me go. Like I keep thinking about them, I keep feeling them. And another aspect of cultivating ourselves for leadership, and I think it's worth saying too that I hope I'm cultivating myself till the day I die. I don't think leadership is an end point. I
Mhm.
think that, our lives on earth are filled with opportunities to learn and grow and change. And it's one of the things I value the most. But it's also really important to try to do a kind of self assessment. And this is where your dear friends and sisters can be incredibly helpful of what am I especially good at? Like, as I was saying earlier, I always assumed that because I'm good at reading a room or sensing what other people need, I assumed that everyone would be like
Mhm.
that. But it's not necessarily true. We're all different and we all perceive differently. We all have different gifts. And oftentimes, it's much easier for those who are close to us to tell us either what we're good at or what we need to get better at
Mhm.
than for us to see ourselves that way. And so developing a really clear-eyed assessment of what are the gifts I have to bring to this world? And then how can I put together what I most love and feel in service to with my gifts that I have to offer, with what brings me the most joy and what gives me the most energy to do, no matter how often I do it. And then you have a great recipe for success. I think that's how leadership really can flourish, is when you find the nexus of those three things.
Mhm. Mhm. And like you said, having women to maybe reflect on how they see you, because even if you
Yeah.
gather 5 women in the same room, they're not necessarily going to see you the same way because like you said, it's based on their own perceptions. They're,
Right.
everyone's so different, and I've been learning that a lot lately is like not to be judgmental or like, oh, well, let me help this person. But I'm perceiving helping them from how I would be helped and really holding a space of like inquiry and opening up to like what they might really need instead of how I would I've been learning a lot of how I would necessarily handle the situation. So I'm learning to be a lot more, my listenership skills. And, when they ask me on something, instead of being blah, 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 these solutions, just like questioning them more to really find out really what they're needing from me. And, do you want solutions or do you want comfort or do you want solutions kind of thing? So, yeah, I think that's so important. And then also getting out of the head and into the heart, and shifting from the head to the heart. And
Well, and Nancy, that's so beautiful what you're saying, because what I've found is that we learn best what we discover for ourselves, right?
absolutely, yep.
And so if you can reflect to somebody or ask them questions that help them to find their own answers, that's the richest source of learning.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've been learning
Yeah.
that a lot lately. I'm just like, you know, when someone might ask about a boyfriend or something, and I ramble off like what they should do, what I feel they should do, and then I get off the phone or wherever, I'm like, shoot. And I can't do it anymore. I have to be more like inquisitive with them and asking the question, how, what, when, where. So I'm really learning that to help my
Yeah.
fellow sisters, or, just to be more of that listener, somebody, that somebody
Yeah.
can come to. And yeah, I love everything that we've talked about. What a beautiful conversation. I would love to know what you have coming up that's next. What is lighting you up? What is next for you, Nina?
Well, I continue to work with Bioneers, which I
Okay.
really love.
Hmm.
And so I'm in the middle of programming our next conference, which we do in a team. And we're having a conference in Berkeley, California, April 6th to 8th. And I'm also involved with Bioneers in developing media. And so we have beautiful, beautiful podcasts and radio series that are all available online on our website, and a great newsletter. And we're getting ready to launch a platform that we're calling Bioneers Learning. And it's going to be a platform that will feature the kinds of classes, both to develop ourselves inwardly as leaders, but also with very practical outward skills. So it's about that balance of the masculine and the feminine. How do you start a community garden? How do you, get off of, start a community solar panel, for instance,
Hmm.
or influence your local policymakers to help make change. And so there will be that kind of stuff, as well as the kind of stuff that I talk about in the book, and that Bioneers often is offering. So, I mean, I love to teach and I love to speak, and I feel like, there's nothing that lights me up more than the liberation and of the power that wants to come through all women of all backgrounds and ages and orientations, um, to help transform this ailing world
Hmm.
that's doing so much harm and that could be doing so much good. So that's what's lighting me up recently.
You've got a lot going on. I love
I
it.
do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you really spoke to my heart about that, about, how we need to raise women up and have, more awareness and bring this earth back into balance, because it just can't keep going on like it is now. And I just do see a huge rising of the feminine. And, as so many more women are using their voices in a more beautiful, authentic way. I'm just such a proponent of the feminine. You know what? Yesterday I went to a concert. Um, it was some Christmas concert, and just seeing these beautiful feminine women, like one was playing a fiddle and then just slinking out and then singing. And I'm just like, God, I honor, like, you're so beautiful. I honor the feminine in you. I used to have a crush on my first grade teacher. Like, I've just always loved women so much, and I love what you're doing for everybody, for these women in the world. I really honor you. I so appreciate that. And you're going to help so many women. I like what you're doing as far as conference coming up about community. We're going back into we've lost community, and that's the next way forward is community and sustainability. And there's just so many new systems that are being created out of, new systems. Everything's kind of falling away. So it is falling away. So it's just a
Well,
beautiful
it's
way.
falling apart.
Yes. In order to come together, it's like destruction, but in destruction, there's birth and there's new beginnings. So, it seems like
Absolutely.
there's a lot of darkness going on, but through the darkness, there's so much light being born, through the darkness that we're seeing on the planet right now. So where can people
Well, it's
find
so
you?
true.
Oh,
Whoops.
yes. Oh, go ahead.
I
No,
was
go ahead.
just going to say,
Yes,
it's
please.
so true. And I think part of the reason that we actually created Bioneers
Mm-hmm.
was because the mainstream media tends to carry the bad news
Oh, yeah.
of all the violence and destruction and toxicity. And nobody's carrying the good news of the world that's being born.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you want a sense of the world that's being born, go to Bioneers.org
Mm-hmm.
and sign up for the newsletter. And if you go to Bioneers.org/NCS for nature, culture, and the sacred, then it will give you a landing page where you can read the introduction to the book and have access to all kinds of media. And I also have my own website called ninasimons.com, so folks can find me there. And I'm so happy to be doing this with you, Nancy. And I also want to just name that I'm feeling more and more strongly that this call toward balance and dynamic equilibrium is a call for the men as well, because the men have been every bit as badly damaged by this patriarchal system
Mm-hmm.
as the women have. And really, we all need to live, there are indigenous sayings that say sometimes the longest distance is the distance between the head and the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And as we learn to trust our hearts more, regardless of what gendered body we may happen to be in right now, I think we can bring ourselves more fully and more wholeheartedly, for sure, to the reinvention of this world and to the world that's being born, because she's calling for us in a big way.
Yes, she is. And yep, men and women as well. We need both. We need really strong men that are tapping into their some of their femininity and feminine essence. And it's balance, it's unity, it's community, it's harmony. And those things are what we need a masculine to tap into and bring, the world back into balance while still being a
Well,
strong
and
man.
as you exactly, well,
Yes,
and as you know, Nancy, what I believe in is what I call full spectrum leadership, because we all have masculine and feminine within
absolutely.
us. And frankly, I need my masculine side as much as I need my feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
I just need them to be talking to each other and kind and in full relationship. And then we have the opportunity to bring our whole selves and all of the facets of ourselves to the reinvention of the world, because it's a huge opportunity right now and a very hopeful one.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I can't wait to see what is birthed in this
Yeah.
with these gorgeous women leaders and these men that are leading from um you know they're they're that are fully tapped into their femininity, their feminine unity, harmony, balance, community, all that. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in our world. And before we end, I do ask all my guests, I would love for you to tell us or share with us what it means for you to live with an awakened heart.
Mm. Well, it means um, remembering to pour awareness into my heart so that I can empathically connect with all of the living world, um, with people who have been systematically oppressed and traumatized and uh, and have therefore suffered much more in this country than those of us with white skin. Um, and with the creatures and the trees, and the mycelium under the ground.
Mm.
There's more and more evidence that there is consciousness pervasive in the universe, and that for me, living with an awakened heart means opening myself to feeling connected to all of it and to recognizing that all of it is my relatives and all of it is contributing to the fullness of my life. And for that, I'm deeply grateful.
Mm. So it's an interconnectedness to all things, and just being, fully empathetic, empathy, or yeah, it's beautiful. Well, thank you, Nina. I appreciate you coming on. I love, like I said, everything that you are offering to our world to make it a better place. And thank you for sharing your heart and your stories. And as you can see back there, this is going to be backwards up here, but this beautiful book, there's so many different sections in this book for embodiment, for reflection,
Mm.
and so many heartfelt stories. So, and also I'll put your site and everything in your show notes so you can go and explore much more of what Bioneers and, upcoming programs and what Nina's all about. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. And thanks to everyone who's listening.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
for now. Here's
Bye
to
for
an
now.
awakened heart.
Here's to awaken heart. Expansive, beautiful.